Mk.1 Eyeball versus 5-cut method. Begin! Hey everybody, Dan here, and welcome to my shop. This video is a follow-up to the one I just released about squaring up a crosscut sled, and whether or not the 5-cut method is superior to the old Mk.1 Eyeball and a machinist's square. I posted this question in a Facebook group, and unsurprisingly, I got a ton of conversation around it. So I decided I would put myself to the test and actually run an empirical check to see if I can use my eye and this square to square this table as good as the 5-cut method is. I'm going to narrate over most of this, but I'm going to go through my whole process step by step and let you know what I'm doing in a little bit of a voiceover. And then at the end, we'll see what the results are, okay? All right, and here we go. I'm going to narrate over the video clips and still photos I'm using for this. I did run the test twice because the first time that I did it, I screwed up a little bit and put the wrong numbers in for the 5-cut method, so I was getting confused by my results. So some of the pictures may be a little bit different from some of the video clips, but this information is all about the final test that I run. So I installed my very best crosscut blade in the table saw. I used a dial indicator on the arbor side, which is the side I'll be doing the cuts on, to check for runout, and I found none. I used a digital angle finder to ensure it was at 90 degrees to the surface of the sled. Normally, I would use a machinist's square for this, but obviously I can't sight down the blade with the fence in the way, so I used a digital angle finder. I checked the sled for lateral movement in the guide rails. I found a little bit of play there, so I used some Teflon tape to ensure that it was a snug fit. This isn't Teflon tape that you'd use for plumbing. This is the kind of Teflon tape that is made for drawer slides. I cut a piece of 1/2 inch plywood, roughly 12 by 24. I passed one long edge over the jointer, taking 1/64 inch passes, and I checked it against my straight edge that has a tolerance down to 1/10,000th of an inch, which is about as accurate as I could possibly get. This was my primary reference edge for all the cuts. The test piece was then cut into a pair of 12 by 12 squares, and I marked each for each of the various type of methods I would be using. I did also run both of the crosscut sled fences through the jointer and the planer to make sure I had good flat square surfaces on them as well. I had 2 squares for the tests. I checked them both for square against the reference edge on the plywood by drawing a line with a sharp pencil, flipping the square over, and drawing a second line. The 8-inch machinist square was dead on. It looked like a single pencil line. The 12-inch combination square was a little less accurate. By the 12-inch mark, the line was noticeably thicker, indicating that the pencil lines were diverging. So I stuck with the machinist square for running the tests. It took me 3 cuts to get the sled squared up by eye. The machinist square looked dead on. I held it up to the light and nothing was showing between the square and the wood. I then ran the 5-cut method, and I used a digital micrometer to measure the width and one single tape measure for both the length of the cut and the distance between the pivot points on the fence. I do think it's important to point out that there is an element of variance here that is introduced with the 5-cut method that you can't really accommodate for, and that is the fact that you cannot use the same instrument to measure both the width of your 5th offcut piece and its length and the length between the 2 pivots on the fence. You use a micrometer to measure the thickness of the offcut piece, and then you have to use some other tool. In this case, I used a tape measure to take the other 2 measurements. And so you don't know if the micrometer and the tape measure along those distances are actually going to match with each other. And also the tape measure is orders of magnitude less precise than a micrometer. But maybe that's an aside. I then used an online 5-cut calculator to avoid any math errors on my part. And so my results, well, using the old Mk.1 Eyeball and checking that with the 5-cut method, I got the sled squared up to almost 44/10,000th of an inch That's the reading I got off of the 5-cut method, and that seems good enough to me. So, at least for me, anyway, I can get a sled just as square using my eyes in a square as I could using the 5-cut method. Anyway, so that's my results, and remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video, whatever that happens to be. Bye.